one of my favorite areas of Elgin. It, of course, was far off from the center of Elgin originally. The center was down on Market Square. But this is my favorite section of Elgin because the library is over there. This library building is in what we would call the Romanesque style, but it also has a touch of French Renaissance style with the arched windows and that slanted roof. Notice the facade treatment up there by the gutter line. Originally, this was a big house built in the 1870s. And then in 1894, Samuel Church and his brother donated the house, cost them $12,000, to the township for a library. Now originally, the house was just in the center portion. Then W. Wright Bell, the architect, added these wings. And then in 1931, they put a second story on that wing, and in 1932, they put a second story on this wing. And so this was a library down to 1968.
There's so much history here in Elgin. It was a dairy capital of the world. For over 100 years, it was the home of the Elgin National Watch Company that produced over 60 million Elgin watches. And during the first 2 decades of the 1900s, it drew racing enthusiasts from across the country, the Elgin National Road Races. Elgin's pretty fortunate. We have 3 historic districts here. We have 11 properties listed in the National Register of Historic Places, and we have a number of local landmarks locally. The professional building, the tower building, the Watch Company Observatory. And there's a Teeple barn out on Randall Road, the only 16-sided barn in Illinois. There's the Lord's Park Pavilion, the Lord Memorial Museum, and others, including 2 beautifully restored fire barns. I guess you could say historic preservation makes so much sense because there's so much history to preserve here in Elgin.
Elgin is a city of neighborhoods. We have a very strong grassroots spirit in this community, and that's really how the historic districts came to be. In the late 1970s, there was a feeling that no one cared about the neighborhoods in Elgin. People were moving out, they were abandoning the neighborhoods, and there was no reinvestment being made, and there was no confidence that there was going to be investment made in the neighborhood. A group of concerned citizens in the Gifford Park area realized that historic preservation and becoming an historic district was a way to save the neighborhood. So in the late 70s, the Gifford Park Association was born.
GPA's been around for 22 years. They started this grassroots movement to try to save these old neighborhoods, and they started right here. There have been many capital improvements through the neighborhood. The street lights that you see throughout the neighborhood, those were part of a bigger grant that we were able to get. Street name signs we put together, we volunteered to put them up and assemble them and use some other fund money to do that. We've improved Gifford Park. We built a gazebo out there with some other funds to really make a little landmark piece there in the park. Something else that GPA has done pretty successfully is go in and acquire some old beaten down properties on a tough looking block and rehab those and sold them off to single family houses. Those have really built a lot of pride in the neighborhood, turned around blocks at the same time, and we have had a lot of fun doing them.
Many other neighborhood groups in the city of Elgin have modeled themselves after GPA and have taken up that call to historic preservation and used it as a tool to help revitalize their neighborhoods. Neighborhood groups such as the Northeast Neighborhood Association Lord's Park Association, the Downtown Neighborhood Association, the Watch Factory neighborhood, as well as groups such as Abode, which are a city-wide group, but they focus on historic preservation and appreciation of our older architecture. All of these groups have made enormous contributions to the historic preservation efforts in the city of Elgin.
Elgin is a beautiful old town. It's been here since the mid-1800s. Some big businesses were in town, and it provided for a variety of housing stock back then. Many people come to Elgin looking for that and are restoring many of the old homes from the 1870s and 1880s on up through the bungalows from the 1920s.
Preservation is really about conservation. It's using what you have and taking advantage of what you have and making it, once again, a part of the vitality of the neighborhood, part of the vitality of the town.
Well, historic preservation has been proven to be a tool of economic development. It actually encourages more dollars ultimately to be invested and recycled through the local economy than new construction. And that's been proven in study after study. Materials are bought locally, the improvement is done here locally, the contractors are almost always local, so it has a tremendous economic benefit. I read somewhere that the benefit for almost every $1 that is initially spent on preservation activities, 7 additional dollars are recycled through the community.
The city has a number of activities that it does to promote historic preservation. It carries out surveys, it gives grants to property owners, we promote our Heritage Through Preservation Week, we recognize individuals and groups from past year's preservation efforts at a Mayor's Awards, and we also protect and preserve our neighborhoods by designating certain areas as historic districts and certain individual structures as historic landmarks. And all of this ties into the general theme of preservation in our community, which is to promote our heritage.
One of the reasons people live in Elgin is that Elgin has a history. It is a community that combines the old with the new, and I think people want to maintain that balance. I've had numerous people who don't live in historic districts, in fact, people who live in newer subdivisions, say they still appreciate and love and support the efforts within our older neighborhoods because they realize that enhances the quality of life for them as well as those people living in the neighborhoods directly. So I think people like that sense of balance that we have in our community, a sense of history, an appreciation for our past, and yet a community that has a lot of energy devoted toward its future as well. So it's a great balance. That's one of the real strengths of Elgin.
If you travel through the city, you'll see that it isn't like other cities. In a time where America is becoming homogenized through fast food, restaurants, and national corporations, where all cities seem to be the same, there's an aura about Elgin that is different. And many of us are happy and proud to call this our home.